10 minutes past 5, it's Howie here on BBC Radio Sheffield. Now, a union is targeting landlords across the UK who it says are exploiting vulnerable people with poor housing. ACORN is a union for tenants who rent privately. ACORN has around 15,000 members and supporters. The full members pay a monthly fee, 1 hour's wage every month, and it operates like a workers' union to protect any members who need help. With 1 in 4 families privately renting, its founders felt people had accepted poor housing and treatment far too long, simply because they didn't know their rights. Its main concerns are rising rents, poor conditions and evictions. Well, I've been chatting to Jonny Butcher from ACORN and Maryam Wright, who's lived in rented accommodation all her life. Jonny told me that bad landlords are all too common.
I think the thing we hear about a lot on the news is that it's a very small minority of landlords that are the problem. It's only like a few bad apples. Our experience of organising tenants is that it's if it is a minority, it's quite a large minority. Some look after tenants, they respond to repairs requests, they don't put up the rent by ridiculous amounts every year, they don't illegally evict people, they don't legally evict people. Unfortunately, quite a lot of landlords don't do that kind of thing, and for them it's just a money-making exercise. They don't see the humans that rent the houses off themselves.
Give me a scenario then, the worst case that you've probably dealt with.
Often it's things like bad repairs jobs, things like evictions, things like rent increases and unfair charges. Our biggest win in Sheffield has been to stop an illegal eviction. Earlier this summer, beginning of August, where we had 100 of our members came out to defend one of their fellow members of their community when they were up against a landlord who had given a family of 4 essentially a few weeks to leave their house, which was totally illegal. They just had the audacity to ask for some repairs, and instead of doing those repairs, the landlord gave them an eviction notice. He was due to turn up one night and kick them out on the street. Our members were having none of that, so turned up and stopped it. Essentially took direct action.
Maryam, what are your experiences like of them renting?
Unfortunately, overwhelmingly, they've been very negative. And the issue that you find with renting is that, there isn't a set standard, so there isn't one size fits all. Landlords don't really sort of adhere to any sort of set guidelines. They often seem to forget that you are a person, you're paying for a service from them. And sometimes what you tend to get is like they have this sort of sense of entitlement over the house and over you. So if you have an issue where, your landlord might be quite friendly, they might be easily contactable, but they might take 2 or 3 weeks to say your boiler's broken. They might take 2 or 3 weeks to fix that. And even though they're responding to you, you're coming home and it's cold, you can't do any washing, bathing is difficult, and it affects your wider life. And the issues that we have is that even those landlords who, their homes might be fit for human habitation, there might not be that much mould on the walls, there might be not any leaks, but then, they might get very agitated if you say, for example, I had a landlord who, it was a nice studio flat that I was living in, and it was fit to a modern standard, apart from the fridge, which was a really old fridge. And what tended to happen was I'd buy a food shop, and then I'd come home and the freezer had broken, so that's £60 just down the drain. I was finding it quite upsetting, and then in the end someone else had to contact him and say, look, she's a young girl, she's very upset by this, can you sort it out? And he seemed really surprised. I was like, what, I didn't think about how she was feeling. I didn't think about that. Of course I'll get it sorted. And he did. He bought me a new fridge. But it's one of those things where you just think, these are homes for people. You find that a lot of land, especially those who've got many properties, they're so far away from the people that they are renting to that they don't understand. Some landlords are outraged when you say, the door's broken. Can you fix the door?
And there's no regulation here,
no.
Is there?
The fact is that people are, there's a stigma for renting. If you rent, people often say, it's a waste of money, or you might not want to admit that you live in a poor condition home, but actually you're paying £900 to do so. That's a lot of money. You're ashamed of that. You're ashamed that you're being exploited, especially when there's young children involved. My parents have lived in some of the most appalling housing that It's unbelievable that housing stock like that even exists. This is the 21st century. You have more rights buying a kitchen appliance than you do renting a home.
What needs to happen then to change all this?
What needs to happen, we need basically a wholesale change in the way that we deal with renting in this country. The amount of people renting from a landlord has doubled in the last 10 years, so a lot of the regulations were fit for like 20 years ago when it was mostly just kind of students and young people renting for a couple of years. Now we've got families renting for the long term, so things like controlled rents, so you know exactly how much is going to be coming out in a year or two's time, so you can plan and budget ahead like any family would do. Things like protection from eviction, so it's a home rather than just a slightly longer term hotel. That's something that I think as an organisation we'd like to see. The things that we think would really benefit tenants, we're going to have to fight for, because they're not going to be handed to us on a plate. The role of ACORN really is to sort of organise tenants so we can first raise expectations that, you know, we live in the 6th richest country in the world and we deserve better, and we need an organisation like ACORN to fight for those rights.
Jonny Butcher from ACORN.